And to my farther left, Councilman Heenan. Will the clerk read the title of Bill 170995?
An ordinance amending Chapter 93300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Erection, Use, and Inspection of Tower Cranes by revising requirements related to tower cranes and adding requirements regarding the use and inspection of mobile cranes, all under certain terms and conditions.
Before we get started with Ms. Rebecca Swanson from Allan, the chair will recognize the bill sponsor, Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to note for the record that we do have an amendment for this bill. It just kind of clarifies some uncertainties and it makes it a little easier legally. So this amendment has been circulated to all members of this body in a timely fashion. I just wanted to let the members of the public know while they were here. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, if Ms. Rebecca Swanson, and also testifying, I have a George Young. You want to join Ms. Swanson at the witness table? You can proceed.
Good morning, Councilwoman Quiñones-Sánchez and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. I am Rebecca Swanson, Director of Planning for the Department of Licenses and Inspections. Today I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 170955 as amended, which, if enacted, would amend Chapter 93300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Erection, Use, and Inspection of Tower Cranes by adding requirements regarding the use and inspection of mobile cranes. As the sponsor, Councilman Heenan, just stated, there are further technical amendments that have been circulated to the committee. It's just to clarify the applicability provision. The department would like to thank Councilman Heenan for working with the department on drafting the bill. Since 2008, after the passage of legislation sponsored by then Councilman Kenny, L&I has regulated the use and inspection of tower cranes in construction. Tower cranes are used almost exclusively in high-rise construction and are treated almost as a building in themselves, requiring building permits and remaining on the construction site for months or even years. Mobile cranes, on the other hand, are much more commonly used on smaller construction and demolition projects throughout the city. While the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania imposes licensing and certification requirements on mobile crane operators, and OSHA has its own set of safety regulations for mobile crane operations, the city has not until now had its own code provisions. Specifically, this bill proposes a new level of oversight for workers involved in the operation of mobile cranes on construction and demolition sites. Individuals who operate mobile cranes must have a crane operator license from the state, or for cranes with a smaller lifting capacity, either a license or current certification from the National Commission for the Certification of Crane Operators or an equivalent organization. Similarly, individuals who perform rigging duties associated with the lifting of materials must hold a current certification from the NCCCO or an equivalent organization. Contractors and building owners will be held responsible for ensuring that all mobile crane operations are undertaken by properly licensed and or certified individuals. They will also be responsible for maintaining copies of such licenses and certifications on site for inspection upon request. Records of crane inspections, which must be performed annually by a certified individual pursuant to OSHA regulations, must also now be kept on site and produced for inspection upon request. The department will contract with a third party with experience in crane operation to conduct periodic inspections of construction sites that utilize mobile cranes for compliance with these requirements. Funds for this were provided in our fiscal year 2018 budget, so we will be prepared to begin implementation soon after the January 1st, 2018 effective date. But to also note that there is a delay in the certification requirements for riggers only. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I will let Mr. Young testify, and then I'll have
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning. My name is George Young, and I'm a senior advisor for George Young Mammut. Our firm is proud to have done good business in Philadelphia since 1869 and to be members of the General Building Contractors Association, or GBCA. GBCA has a membership of over 250 commercial, industrial, and institutional general contractors, subcontractors, material suppliers, and construction service firms throughout the greater Philadelphia region. We'd like to thank Chairwoman Quiñones-Sánchez, the members of the Rules Committee, and Councilman Heenan for the introduction of Bill 170955. The issue has been the subject of discussion for the past few years, and we're pleased with the results and the effort put forth by City Council and the Department of Licensing and Inspections to see it through. The legislation before you today will elevate the requirements for personnel to more safely operate mobile cranes in the City of Philadelphia. As an organization, GBCA believes this legislation will result in a safer work environment on job sites. Having utilized third-party certified riggers and crane operators and signal persons for the past 7 years, I can attest that basic skill sets improve with the assistance that third-party skills and knowledge testing certification requires. The crane operator and rigger certification requirements will provide a baseline body of knowledge and skills to properly operate and use mobile cranes on a construction site across the city. While we understand the value of certification, they will never replace the value of practical experience. Experience is always necessary when applying any body of knowledge on an active work site while ensuring the safety of those on the job and in the public realm. The delayed enactment date for the certification of riggers will allow the current and future workforce to meet the elevated certification requirements placed on riggers and crane operators. Anytime an increased level of qualification is introduced, it takes time to train and certify personnel while simultaneously maintaining a safe staffing level for ongoing operations. GBCA members have very experienced craft persons using mobile cranes every day, and the legislation will level the playing field for everyone working with this equipment in the construction industry. GBCA supports this legislation because we believe Philadelphia is at its best when industry experts and city officials work together on solutions that uphold the high standard of building in our city. We're appreciative that the committee allowed us to participate in the hearing today, and thank you.
Thank you. I want to recognize that the Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Allan Domb, is here, and Councilman Alfred Tollenberger. Rebecca, real quickly, who's the third party?
We have not identified one yet, but it will be an engineer with experience in crane operations. Commissioner Perry has already reached out to people in the industry, and we do have someone who has been interested in doing it and was just waiting for the legislation.
Mr. Young, so who are your third-party entities that?
The people who provide third-party certification and testing of skills and knowledge are the National Commission for the Certification of Crane Operation, or typically referred to as NCCCO.
Mm-hmm. And so what is it, what are the requirements for someone to be certified to be able to do this oversight?
Well, first, if you don't study, you're probably going to fail. So there's a little bit of book work to do. And there are practical tests which you have to pass, as well as written tests. So you have to actually be able to look at different types of rigging equipment and discern between what's safe to use and what's not. You have to be able to show that you have a basic level of skill and that you've retained that knowledge on your own. It's not an open book test.
So who does the certification for this?
The certification is through CCO. They don't do any training. All they do is skills assessment and testing. And they provide very professional tests to people, and they provide the certification.
So how long does it take someone to get certified?
Ma'am, like anything in life, it varies quite a bit. If you have an experienced person who has been doing it for any number of years, you can freshen up for the test and make sure that you understand the different regulations, and you can do that within the day. Testing usually takes 1 day for practical, 1 day for written. If you have somebody who's not very experienced in this, it's going to take a longer period of time, and it's all based upon how quickly somebody retains the knowledge.
So who usually goes into this field? Like, if I'm in the construction world and I decide to go here, is it an engineer, as Rebecca said, or is it someone who?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
I said, who normally goes into that field? What kind of background do they have?
Well, lifting with mobile cranes is performed by a wide variety of the construction industry. It could be anybody from a carpenter lifting bundles of 2x4s to pipe fitters who lift pipes. It could be air conditioning equipment onto the top of roofs. It could be riggers who move machinery or transformers. So lifting bridge sections. And it can be anything that's small. It doesn't have to be heavy, but it just has to go vertically somewhere. And it covers all phases of the construction business.
Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Councilwoman. Just point of information, I'm not sure if the answer was clarified. So what kind of background and skill set does somebody need to have to be a rigger? Is that clear, Councilwoman, or did he answer your question?
He kind of answered it's a limited field.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Well, the type of background that you would typically have is you would want to be.
how do you become a rigger?
You would want to be mechanically inclined. One path into the industry is through some of the unions within our town. We have a riggers local, but rigger here is a generic term, so it can be through the carpenters, it can be through the electricians, it can be through other crafts. Additionally, often truck drivers and crane operators seem to swap jobs and prefer the more hands-on work that a rigger may do. It's a lot of problem solving. Education typically runs from normally high school graduates through college graduates.
Okay, so, if somebody's a rigger, they could be multi-crafted, just having the skill set in rigging equipment or loads and having the expertise on the job and through certifications. Is that
Yes, sir,
correct?
Councilman. It's attaching the lifting gear from the crane to the piece that's going to be lifted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Domb.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and good morning. I have three quick questions. One question is, when someone's operating a crane and lifting material, is the area they're lifting the material over supposed to be closed off, or can it be open to the public where the crane's lifting the material over?
I would say general safety requirements would tell you that people should not be walking under a suspended load.
I only asked that
And the
because
area should be
Right.
closed off.
a few months ago, I'm driving down Chestnut Street. I'm not going to tell you exactly where, but it was between like 18th and Broad. And I'm in my car, and this huge crane has the material like over my car. Right on, I'm just wondering, is that legal? Because I looked up and I actually called 911. I thought it was a safety hazard. I want to know if it's a violation of the law or not.
It would be in that all the equipment, if for nothing else, all the manufacturers of the equipment that's the rigging straps would tell you that you're not allowed to work under a suspended load, and I think by inference that means you're not supposed to have somebody under a suspended load. It certainly is not in the best practice of the industry.
Okay.
I believe the OSHA regulations address that, but from an L&I perspective, we would want that sidewalk closed, we'd want that street closed. And that's part of the reason we're doing this, because we know mobile cranes kind of roll in and out.
Right.
And they'll do that without our inspector even knowing that they're on site. So this is part of the reason where we want to make sure we're aware.
So if we, as the public, see something like this, who should we call?
If you believe it's an imminent danger, like there's a load swinging over your car, call 911. We always say 911 for what you believe is an emergency. If it's something that you believe is happening, or have knowledge of happening, call 311, and we'll get to it, and the building inspector to go out, and we may not catch it as it's happening, but it would be a conversation with that contractor to knock it off.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, in the last 10 years, have we had any accidents relating to rigging and operation of this equipment, cranes?
Yes.
We have. How many have we had?
Well, I can think of two that I'm aware of. One on Hamilton Street, one down at the Philadelphia Navy Yard.
Were any of them serious accidents?
Yes.
And do you think they could have been avoided with this training?
At the Navy Yard, the answer is yes. At the up on Hamilton Street, in my opinion, this training would not have had an effect on what was the cause. It was an equipment failure, part of a suspension broke. So I don't believe that training would have accomplished that, unless it's in the inspection portion of the bill, whereby better inspection of the equipment by more competent people might have caught what was, I'm told, a micro fracture.
Well, we could, but by the Navy Yard, this training would have avoided that
Yes, sir.
situation. That's powerful.
In my opinion, yes, sir.
The last question is probably for you, is I think this body passed a bill a year and a half ago about when people want to pull permits in the city, they need a tax clearance certificate. And I assume that applies to crane operators. Are we monitoring that? Do you know?
So the crane operator wouldn't necessarily be pulling the permit for a mobile crane because it would be kind of part of the overall building permit that's pulled by the general contractor.
Okay, so
on
general
the site.
contractor, right. So, but it doesn't apply to the subcontractors on the project then?
Not at this time, no.
And not to contradict, but it works both ways. Sometimes the general contractors will pull the permit, but just as often for a mobile crane, the crane company is tasked with pulling the permit where the rigging contractor may do it.
So in that case, are they supplying a tax clearance certificate?
I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know the answer to the question, Councilman.
Okay.
The applicant has to provide the certificate, the
So
clearance.
is that something that you're monitoring in L&I, or is that revenue?
That, when you apply for the permit, you must come with that cert from the Revenue Department, the tax
Okay.
clearance cert.
All right, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Tollenberger.
Thank you, Council Lady and Madam Chair. I appreciate that greatly. Mr. Young, just two maybe quick questions, I hope. The riggers local, how many members, I'm asking some questions on riggers. How many members do they have approximately?
Well, the riggers local themselves have approximately 300.
300. And are they all master riggers, or there's a...
No, sir. Not everyone is a master rigger, and as a matter of fact, that definition or that term really is a New York City term where they actually have a master rigger's license, and we don't have that here in Philadelphia. But in terms of being certified, I will tell you that the vast majority, if not all of them, are certified. The riggers local, and here we're talking a specific local, not riggers as a generic term.
Right.
The riggers local actually does some of that testing as a third party.
Now, can you be a certified rigger and not be a member of the local?
Yes, sir.
And how many of them are there in Philadelphia, approximately?
I don't know the answer, but I
I mean,
can
it's a
tell you
guess.
that at last count, just CCO, that one company that does testing evaluation, has in excess of 10,000 riggers that have been certified. There are, of course, other competing models that do that as well.
And that will be 10,000 in what jurisdiction?
10,000 nationally.
Oh, nationally. Okay, that's good. I mean, answers my question. Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. The clerk read the title of Bill 160768.
An ordinance amending Subcode A of Title IV of the Philadelphia Code entitled the Philadelphia Administrative Code by amending Chapter 3 entitled Permits by requiring a waste collection plan for construction, demolition, or alterations, all under certain terms and conditions.
The chair will note that there's also a technical amendment to this bill. And Rebecca, you could get started. Oh, and Nick, too.
Good morning, Councilwoman Sanchez and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. I am Rebecca Swanson, Director of Planning for the Department of Licenses and Inspections. Today, I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 160768 as amended, which, if enacted, would amend Chapter 3 of the Philadelphia Administrative Code entitled Permits to require additional information regarding waste haulers. Again, as the Councilwoman just stated, there has been a technical amendment regarding the effective date. First, we would like to thank the sponsor, Council President Clark, and his staff for working with us on the proposed amendments. We would also like to recognize the Office of Recycling and the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet for their commitment to this issue and for the enforcement role they will take on in the implementation of this bill. The bill would require applicants for any building or demolition permit that requires the submission of plans to list on the permit application the names of all waste haulers to be used by the contractor to remove debris during the construction or demolition project. The bill also requires contractors to maintain evidence of proper disposal of debris, including tipping receipts, for 3 years after the permit is finalized, and to provide this inspection for audit upon request. This evidence for audit upon request. This bill also adds an enforcement provision that allows the department, after the appropriate administrative hearing, to suspend or revoke a contractor's license if he or she is found to illegally dispose of or dump construction, demolition, or alteration debris on any project, including projects that do not require permits. This action against the license would be in addition to any criminal penalties that may be imposed upon the contractor by our law enforcement agencies. The department supports this bill and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Illegal dumping is a problem throughout throughout the city, and LNI is particularly concerned with the dumping of construction and demolition debris. This bill is designed to stop this activity two ways. First, by reminding contractors at the time of permit application that they must think about their waste collection and disposal plans from the very beginning stages of their project. And second, by giving the city audit and enforcement power over contractors who may not be following the rules. In order to most effectively and efficiently enforce the new requirements, the department must reconfigure its in-progress online permit application system, as well as create a registry of waste haulers so that we can ensure contractors are using established companies to remove debris. As such, the bill has an effective date of January 1st, 2019. That's the technical amendment that was just circulated. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions.
The chair recognizes Nick Esposito for testimony, and then we'll ask questions from the panel.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairwoman Sanchez. And members of the committee, my name is Nick Esposito, and I am the Director of the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet in the Managing Director's Office. I'm here to offer testimony on Bill Number 160768 regarding the adoption of a requirement that applicants for building and demolition permits submit the name of the waste hauler for the project in order to obtain a permit. Illegal short dumping is a longstanding challenge in many neighborhoods, and unfortunately, construction-related debris is one of the most common types of materials that are illegally dumped in neighborhoods. In 2016, CLIP responded to and abated 15,000 vacant lots. 128 of these cases were for heavy illegal dumping. On these lots, over 1,600 tons of debris were removed. Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful uses the metric of $619 per ton for illegal dumping cleanup, which amounts to almost $1 million in costs just for CLIP. In 2016, the Streets Department cleaned up 921 lots for a total of 11,525 tons of debris. Using that same Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful metric, that's over $7 million of cost to the city. Thus, the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet believes that requiring contracts to establish a paper trail for proper waste disposal in order to obtain a permit for most construction and demolition projects will accomplish two very important objectives. The first, it will set a standard that waste management needs to be a priority for these projects. By setting a standard that a waste hauler needs to be identified when obtaining a permit, it will ensure that waste disposal is not an afterthought, but rather part of the project scope and cost at the beginning of the project. This process will hopefully educate the construction and demolition business community on the necessity to select a reputable company for this work. Number two, it will create a paper trail that the Office of Recycling and/or an investigating law enforcement agency can follow should there be evidence of improper waste disposal or an unkempt work site. In closing, the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet is supportive of the bill as a vehicle to better manage the disposal of construction and demolition debris. We thank Council President Clark and his staff and this committee for the leadership in finding proactive and effective ways to address the illegal dumping issue in Philadelphia. I understand there are also amendments to this bill that the Cabinet also supports, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I certainly support this bill. As Ms. Swanson mentioned, short dumping is a real problem, especially when it's construction debris. I guess my only question, Rebecca, is January 1st, 2019 sounds like a long time. Could be a whole lot of dumping in between. Why is it?
It does. And that's because right now, the city doesn't know who waste haulers are. We don't have a registry, because there is no local license because they're licensed at the state level, so we're preempted from creating one here. So what we were going to do is we were going to change our building permit application to just have a blank box to write in on your application for the permits for which this would be required, who your waste hauler is. And then when we thought about it, we realized that's not really going to be effective because people could write in with anything they want. And it might not even be a reputable waste hauler. So what we want to do is we want to take this time, we want to work with the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet, we want to get the list from the state of who are the licensed waste haulers, create a registry, and then when we build into Eclipse in the permit application, we'll do a drop down. So you have to be a registered waste hauler, and you'd only be able to select one of the waste haulers that come forward and registers with the city. So we do want to give some time for the waste haulers to do that registry, for us to build it into Eclipse, which is going to take some time and some money, and then let the contractors know, here's the list of everyone who's registered, this is who you have to use. So, because we think the education component is really going to be the big thing. We don't want to surprise them in January to say, oh, you must
Okay.
say this now.
Now, I understand maybe not making it January 2018, but January 2019 sounds like a long time to me. I don't know.
The hope
You know,
is that-
look, you guys know how to do this stuff better than me, but it just sounds like a long time because a whole lot of stuff could happen in the interim.
Oh, no,
you know?
we absolutely understand, and the hope is
Yeah.
that it will be done much more quickly. But again, it's an eclipse issue. It's stop it,
I
because
know, we hear
we're
about
building that
eclipse a lot.
now. An online permit application is probably not going to be fully available until January of 2019, so we're tying it to that. But we always cross our fingers that we are.
Okay.
And
are-
Councilman Greenlee, just to put your fears at rest, the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet is working diligently on many fronts through many different
I
other
understand.
departments to work really hard to start really making him headway on the illegal dumping issue, so.
Okay, all right. No, I appreciate that. It just struck me
I
when I
know.
saw 2019 sound like a long time.
I know.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair recognizes Councilman Tonnenberger.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Ms. Swanson, and just in general, a person that has a waste hauler's permit in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, would be fully legal to come into Philadelphia because that's the only permit there is in the state. Is that correct?
If they are licensed through the state, whether they're located in Philadelphia or not, they could come in and register, but they would have to get a commercial activity license first. They wouldn't be allowed to register without that.
Okay.
So that we're making sure they're paying taxes and all that. You can't do any type of business
So
without
they're
having
still,
that.
not only do they, okay, so they're registered as a waste hauler with the state, but they still have to do things with the city as far as the commercial activity. Is that
If
correct?
they're getting paid in the city, they need a commercial activity license. So we would make that a requirement in order to get on the registry in the
And
first
of course,
place.
any state or city taxes they would owe, if they owe any, that would be checked on.
Oh, yeah, they would have to, in order to get on the registry, we would make sure that they have the commercial activity license and that they are tax compliant,
And then-
just like any other business.
It will take you to 2019 to get that list together.
It's not so much getting the list together, it's the education component, and it's building it into Eclipse, building into the permit application, this drop-down menu. Unfortunately, every change we make to Eclipse costs money,
Got
and
it.
we can only do it at certain times in the process, so that we don't delay the whole process.
Okay.
Just based on the schedule of implementation.
Yeah, I mean, because I think what Councilman Greenlee
Yeah.
brought up is, is concerning in the sense it is a long time. It's,
But there's the criminal penalties still apply in the meantime. You can still,
Okay.
and that's really where this is. We want these people to be arrested for illegal dumping. That's how
Gotcha.
we're really going to scare them. But obviously, it's not always a priority of the district attorney's office because, there's
a lot of things
a
going
lot
on.
of things they had to arrest people for.
Yep.
So this kind of allows Allan and I to have another hammer to say, all right, hey contractor, we're taking away your license or suspending your license if you can't get yourself together and hire somebody who's reputable.
That's fine, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Quick question, how are we doing around cameras on the traditional dump sites of construction debris? I mean, we have certain parts of, particularly my district, right, where people go every single week. How are we doing about having more cameras that we can move around?
Yeah, so as part of the work of the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet, that was one of our recommendations and one of the things we'll be implementing. So we are currently in the process right now of starting to understand the landscape of where all these different cameras are, both through the streets department, through any cameras that Clip had put up originally, as well as the police department, and then through the private sector, through businesses, and again, that's conversations that we need to have, being that people do register with entities like SafeCam. So we're trying to better coordinate and understand what that landscape looks like, so we would have access to those cameras. We're also trying to work on different techniques that we can use for better, because it's one thing to collect all that video footage, it's another thing to actually sit through it and sift, actually get what we need evidence-wise. So easier ways to get that evidence and better education on people on the camera setups that they would need to better catch things like license plates that you actually need for criminal prosecution. So that is all in process right now. We'll hopefully have some updates in the next 6 months on some.
So what triggers you to understand that a place is a dump site? Is it 3 times after we clean it up, 4 times after we clean it up? I mean, what triggers?
It's 10 times.
Because I have sites that get cleaned every other week, right? I mean, how long do we wait before we say this is a problem because we've cleaned 3, 4, 5 times? What are some of the matrix that the Zero Cabinet is utilizing for that?
Yeah, so the first one that's already in progress is the litter index citywide. So we have the litter index that's going through and taking a 1 through 4 rating. So 1 being the best rating you can get, it's pretty much no litter, 4 being heavily short dumped. We also have a function built into that If someone is on site, just so it doesn't go unreported, they can hit a button and it generates a ticket directly to 311, so that's taken care of straight away. Better collection of that data that we'll share throughout departments, so like CLIP is sharing that with streets and everyone's seeing the landscape of short dumping, will better help us, again, with some other data sets that we can overlay on, better put our resources towards, doing proactive and also collaborative solutions through those different departments. That's one major way that we're looking at it. Again, through the different metrics of how Clipper Streets treats it, I can't speak directly to what they would say is that's the heavy dump site, but that is something we're working through is, they're just as frustrated as anyone else as Clip goes back, abates a vacant lot, they become a cleaning service for these lots, and that's something we're going to be moving away from through the initiatives that we're undertaking right now.
So that's for contractors, small contractors. What about people who do minor renovations to their home and some of that is getting dumped? How are we looking to address that issue? Do we believe as a city we should pick up some of that minor construction or not? Because we pick it up anyway. Where we pick it up in front of someone's house or we pick it up at the next neighboring lot. How are we addressing that?
Now, are you asking that in the context of someone who's doing work without pulling a permit?
Minor construction.
Minor construction, but not pulling a permit even though they should need one.
Maybe a window, maybe, I don't know, a new toilet,
Sure.
the stuff that we see in the traditional dumps.
Sure. Well, one thing I will say, if it does need a permit, what I think is the beauty of this legislation and why we're so excited about it as a cabinet is the simplicity of it. That it's not, I don't think this is a huge burden on people to just kind of think about this through their process. And I do think talking to contractors, and obviously being in the 7th District, knowing a lot of contractors, I genuinely think that some people just don't think about it, and they get themselves in a situation where they think they're doing something good by giving the guy down the street who has a truck some business, but they don't know anything about if that guy has a activity license or anything of that nature. So that's one part of it. I think the other part that we've been working towards, and again is a big part of the cabinet, is expanded access to our sanitation convenience centers. They're a gem. I mean, we had people come from other cities and they could not believe how many we have and how long they're open. Other cities don't have that kind of resource, but it is, when people don't know that resource is there or how to utilize it, that's something that the cabinet through the streets department is really trying to work on, having people better understand. So that time, if they're doing something that doesn't need a permit, I took a window out and whatever they did, that they know, one, what you can put curbside or what you can take to one of these great centers that are open. That's something we're working through.
Well, some of us strongly believe that we should go back to some sort of bulk trash pickup in our neighborhoods. I mean, we pick it up anyway, right? And I know that during 2009 and 2009 and others, because of the downturn, we stopped doing that. I just think that, people are paying their tax dollars, and this notion that everybody has a car that they can put, that leaky toilet that they just fixed in the back of their car, and take it to a dump site it's not happening. So is there any thinking of we're going to have to do at least some curbside? I mean, before people used to call, right, and say, I'm going to have an extra this or an extra that. Do we see a time where we're going to go back to that?
I will say those conversations are happening right now through the cabinet, through the streets department. I think it's too preliminary to say what it exactly looks like. But on the private sector solutions, there is a lot of technology that's moving to the city right now. I don't want to name certain companies, but that have even, private solutions to that where people can use things like apps to kind of say, I have this trash.
My
and then
seniors don't have apps.
No, for sure. So for those people.
It barely could get them to call 311.
I
Can I get my senior not to call me
I hear
or
you.
call me down
Yes.
when I'm driving? And
So there's other ones that are actually some private sector solutions that aren't app-based. They're like, phone-based or text message-based, which is also really interesting, knowing that landscape in the industry. But through, again, there also has to be that public sector solution, one for the person who doesn't use technology, or two for the person that can't even afford, a small amount, but still has debris that they need to get rid of. So those are conversations that are currently happening. And again, I hope to have some more of an update for you in the near future.
one of the things, and then Councilman Jones and others, one of the things that worries me around some of the regulations that we've created, and this has happened several times, where we will not pick up, or we have instructed the streets department not to pick up anything that's in front of a lot because we don't want to encourage dumping, right? But someone gathered that trash and put it out so we can pick it up. So this, I've personally watched the streets department leave it there, and then I got to call them, and they got to come back and pick it up anyway. Are we looking at some of those regulations that are really just kind of outdated? We're going to pick it up anyway. This notion that if someone gathered stuff, packaged it, that we would skip it because it's a lot. and we don't want to encourage. Are we looking at those regulations? I just think,
So I can't speak directly to that specific issue, but I do know that the Streets Department has been working through, they're in a process right now of revisiting their regulations, so they're in that process right now. Again, there's a lot of things, that's why we have things like the Behavioral Science Subcommittee through the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet, really looking at what is the science behind the behavior. If we did leave it there, is it actually going to stop, or is it going to cause more of a problem? Because there's more, and these are the conversations and the thinking through we're trying to do. We're trying to do it at the quickest pace possible, but again, make the best decisions possible with the evidence that we have. So again, like I said, those conversations
so
are
all
happening.
those things are being reviewed?
Yes.
I think I go all over the country, and we're one of the dirtiest cities, and I think we got to really revisit all our regulations. I think we gutted our streets department, and we need to really revisit that.
Yes, and again, to give another plug to this bill, is that it's smart, simple solutions like this are what we need.
Stupid simple. I believe in that. Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for those questions. As a district council person, we have an occupational hazard. And that occupational hazard is to know the exact street that your district begins and ends on. In so doing, you develop an eye. You develop an eye for trash, short dumping, and other things. And it irks you to your soul because you know that some constituent is about to complain about it. So I go back to my chairperson's question as how many times is a place a dump site? And I say that because I just texted my staff and asked Marion Avenue between 52nd and 48th, how many times we have called you guys to clean it up? And the answer came back 7. 7 this year. Every year on average, I'm thinking it's 7. So there is a behavior that is developed where the contractors, and we even found, I think at Carlton, the commissioner came out, there were 300 tires, 300 dumped on that. And it was picked up, and when we looked at another, maybe 3 days later, there were 300 more tires out there. Because obviously in the behavioral thing, they said, well, okay, this must be the site where you get pickup. Carlton was able to apprehend the individual, and I think he charged him $50 a tire and put that right on him. And in the end, what I was told was it looks better, it's mathematically better, my colleague will tell you, to take the fine than do the proper dumping, catch me if you can. So we have to do something different. I definitely want to know what your matrix is for those cameras, because I understand that some of them are temporary and removable, and we can bait and switch and make a place hot and then take them away when it cools off. But we have to do a better job of this, because guess what? The constituent calls us, and we wind up calling you. So whatever your policy is we need to adapt it to real street, real inner city conditions, so that we can solve this thing amicably, because we're not going to save money the way we're doing it now. And so I just need to know, when is a dump site in your mind? How many times? Because I told you 7 on Marion Avenue this year.
Yes. So you're asking for my personal opinion on that, or?
I want the city's opinion.
The city's, so I can't.
I got a personal opinion.
Yeah, so do I. But I can't specifically speak to that. I want to consult with my colleagues on that, being that hasn't been a discussion that we've had of when, really what we're trying to look at is where are we seeing this happening, and also what are the systemic issues kind of behind it. So I think, but again, not just on this broad kind of macro level where everything gets lost, is on those granular issues in certain neighborhoods within a certain area. Why is this happening? And I think that's even sometimes a hard question to answer. Having the litter index information that we can then kind of overlay with things like 311 calls, where cameras are, how many, because we have all that data, how many times Streets has gone to this place to pick up we have all that. Once we start really being able to synthesize, I just came from a smart cities conference, kind of talk that was just happening. And, there's one thing to collect all of this information, it's how do you actually use it? And that's what makes you smart. So I think that's what we're working through. We'll have the litter index finished by January 1st. We'll have those other data sets that we'll be able to put together, and that's when we'll really start sitting down, not just with single departments, but with all the different departments in the room, talking about, this is this area, this is where we're seeing this happening, and this is how, if we can do this coordinated response, we can make some headway on the issue. So, to your point, like I said, I will definitely go back. I think it's a great point to really kind of, if we could talk about those kind of formalized designations to say, this is a dump site. The streets department definitely has the things they call, they know like the 30 spots that are like, these are persistent dump sites that people use as their own personal dumps. I will say to this council's credit, we did take a huge step in advancement through Councilman Green's bill that was passed last month to raise those fines. So the cost of doing business is now starting to be outweighed by the fines that we can impose, and better coordination with the DA's office on imposing them we'll be working through.
Would it surprise you to know that suburban contractors come to the city to dump?
Not at all.
And they feel, well, almost, and I'm not speaking for them, well, folk in the inner city put up with this, as opposed to suburban folk who would track us down to the end of the earth, like, well, who's the guy that chased the guy for the loaf of bread? Les Miserables. I mean, and so we have to get back up a little bit about this thing, because we will always wind up with the designation, the dirtiest city, because our suburban counterparts are helping us out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Domb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for you, Mr. Esposito. In your testimony, you said the Streets Department cleaned 921 lots,
Yes, sir.
11,500 tons. Who owns those lots?
I'd have to check on exactly what the ownership is. From my understanding, just because when there's like large dumps, I believe a majority would be public,
It's probably a mix.
but a mix. Yeah, I can't say the exact mix of
City owns
public.
those lots, most of them?
Some of them, I would
Some
say
of
there's a mix between.
Because I'm doing the math, it's $7,600 per lot to clean it up. And my question is, A, should we be selling them or even giving them away? Because I don't think, probably the taxes aren't even $7,600. What are we doing to dispose of these lots that are costing us a small fortune to maintain?
So again, I don't think that's something I can.
Point of information, it's normally PRA and
But they only own
VPRC.
25%. We have 40,000 vacant structures and lots in the city,
Yes.
of which the city owns less than 9,000 of them. So most of them are private and delinquent.
Yeah, but I don't think he can answer those questions
Yeah.
Yes.
on that. That's all I was trying to say.
And I would just say intuitively, though, I think you are hitting the nail on the head, is that and to Councilman Jones' point, why is this happening in our city? Well, in other cities that don't have vacant lots, it's a lot harder to dump because you don't have places to dump. We have a lot of opportunities in this city, so again, this is above my pay grade of making that decision, but I have an agreement with you that if there were less vacant lots in the city, there would be less opportunities to legal dump, there would be less illegal dumping.
And do we bill back that cost to those lots?
So that goes through, and again, that goes through L&I and through CLIP for abatement fees when CLIP goes out and abates. I know that's something that was in our recommendations, because as I understand, there's an issue with CLIP hits a certain threshold, but if they go back a certain amount of times, I think it's 2, they can charge, but after that, they don't really recoup those fees, so basically they can get into this flow. If they did the same lot 5 times, well, then they're not recouping the necessary losses. That's in our recommendations, and that is something we would like to visit in the future with legislation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Squilla?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we talk about lots, obviously that's a big issue, but what we also see is a lot of the dumping in and around scrap yards, where people go and drop off their materials they may or may not be able to scrap, or break them up in or close by the scrap yards. And is there, and we talked about this before, is there any possibility of these areas to get the cameras and surveillance that we could install for the small, low cost now that they are, and really recoup money through fines?
Yeah, the cameras issues is something those are the areas where we, again, using the data and knowing that this is a place like using the litter index with the different data sets, using cameras. I think another thing you brought up, scrap yards, is, and it's been the cabinet's opinion, we've talked about this in our plan, that, the scrap yards actually can be a major partner in zero waste. They do a service that not, like when a car goes to die, it has to go somewhere, and that you can recycle that metal and put it back into the productive use is great. So we definitely want to look at strategies of more engagement with scrapyards to kind of professionalize them and bring them out of the shadows, so to speak. We have a great gem in the city is the Scrapyard Task Force. It's it runs out of the water department, but it's a task force of many different entities, L&I being one of them, going out and looking at scrapyards, making sure they're in certain compliance, both environmentally, policy-wise, and legislatively. So those are definitely things that we're looking at. Again, it's kind of, how do we look at this as a systemic issue, and what are all the tools we can employ? I think cameras is a great first step, but if we can get ourselves into a situation where I don't think that will get us as far as we need to go. So definitely looking at that, and then how do we stop it from the first point, but then how do we ensure that in the future it doesn't persist?
Or even looking at regulations, maybe having them create break zones inside their walls where people could go and instead of destroying everything in the block before.
Yes.
And, bring it into the scrapyard, have a break zone, and then maybe we give them a discount on removing the trash.
Yeah.
So we don't have to constantly go. Some of these places look like trash trucks blew up
Yeah.
in the block right before the scrapyard, and we have to constantly go back there and clean it up. And so they have to, you're right, they have to partner with us in order to try to come up with a way to do that. But if we could require them to have maybe break points inside their walls, or maybe dumpsters where they could throw things that they aren't going to recycle or use into these dumpsters, and we could help them remove that stuff, that would save us a lot of money just on that instead of going in and cleaning it up every 3-4 weeks.
And your legislation from last spring was a great example of this, of just bringing them more into compliance and thinking through, you can't just cut tires out in the open air and have it blow all over the neighborhood. I mean, that's certain things, but then can we work more with them to give them some tools and resources to kind of better their systems, so then they're not just, the reason that they're doing that is they don't want to take the time to pull off a tire with like a nut and bolt system. They just want to cut them right off. So how do we, and again, that was a great, leading on what you've already done with that. I think those are the kind of things we want to build on.
And I think maybe we can incentivize them to do the right thing too by helping them along the way. So I'm not there just to close them down, because you're right, we are going to need places to get rid of things. And if we have no scrapyards in the city, I don't know where we would take stuff, but if we can incentivize them to do the right thing and help them along the way, I think they would work with us, because their goal is to make money also, and we just got to find a way around that.
Completely agree.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the behavioral science around this, but, I'll just remind, and again, this is a conversation I've had with Commissioner Williams several times. When I first got elected, I had 50 public trash cans in my entire district with the highest litter index. And what I got told was that they didn't want to put public trash cans in my district because people would dump. And I was like, so which one comes first, the trash can or the dumping? We now have about 400 trash cans, but it took me 10 years to get there. One of the biggest indicators, or one of the contributors to this stuff, and I've had this conversation with the general manager of SEPTA, is every single SEPTA stop where people are catching the bus and they're not allowed to go on the bus with the trash, and where does it end up? And at some point, if we're really seriously going to address, just like incentivizing the recycling plants, SEPTA has to figure this out with us. This notion that they can't put a trash can in their buses and remove a seat is not an acceptable one. And I say that because I have 10 L stops, and I've never seen so much trash around the L stops and around the bus stops, and it's huge. And so, this no as opposed to the how, and maybe some of the behavioral science stuff that you're going to look at is going to look at that. Those are their customers, and to their credit, they've become much more aggressive in what they're doing around the L stops, but it shouldn't take me. And the reason that it really upset me was I went to a school, Sheridan School, and one of the young people who prepared the presentation for me asked me why he had to walk over all the trash at Kensington and Allegheny. It just so happens that the next day I was going to be meeting with the general manager. And you know what? I had never been so embarrassed that this young kid at 8 years old is telling me, why do I have to walk through all this trash? They have 30,000 customers that go through Kensington and Allegheny. Those are their customers. Why are we picking up their trash? So I think we need to get creative. I think this is one of those challenges, you know. I'm glad that the mayor has put this zero waste committee, but we really do have to look at this stuff. And everybody has to do more as it relates to this, because we can be poor, we don't have to be dirty. The two are not mutually exclusive. So thank you very much. Sorry, Nick, that we had to put you through all of this.
I love talking trash with you guys. It's good.
And he's a neighbor, I'm sorry.
Thank you. For questions. Thank you.
Will the clerk read the title of the next bill?
An ordinance amending Section A301 of Title IV of the Philadelphia Code entitled Application for Permit, and Section 91008 entitled Demolition Contractor License by adding and amending certain provisions related to permits for demolition and the licensing of demolition contractors, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you. The chair will recognize the bill sponsor for some opening comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the L&I Committee, and thank you, Mayor Kenny administration, for continuing what we kind of started with the collapse of the crane and building at 22nd and Market, which lost lives. We've constantly been evolving to make it a little safer for Philadelphians as we go through. This bill, Madam Chair, requires contractors attend periodic training on safety. This bill requires Class A demolition contractors to have supervisory and site safety managers with 3 years of experience. This bill increases the bond required for Class A demolitions, which is size, to $50,000 in bonding, requiring Class B demolition contractors to have at least $10,000. These increases in scopes and also increases of violations are part of the Streets Department and L&I and OSHA, trying to just make it a little safer. So, to the credit of the administration, they didn't wait for this bill. They've been implementing a lot of this as on the fly. What this bill does is codifies all of that in those practices into the law of the city of Philadelphia. And so thank you.
Okay, with that, Rebecca.
Thank you, Councilman. Good morning, Councilwoman Sanchez and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. I am Rebecca Swanson, Director of Planning for the Department of L&I. Today, I am here to provide testimony on Bill Number 170898, which, if enacted, would amend Section A301 of the Philadelphia Administrative Code entitled Application for Permit, and Section 91008 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Demolition Contractor License by adding provisions related to the licensing of demolition contractors. First, the department would like to thank Councilman Jones and Councilman Johnson for introducing this bill on behalf of the administration. Since 2014, any contractor seeking to demolish a building in the city must have a specific demolition contractor license. The license requirements are set forth in Title IX and administered through regulations set by the department. This bill, as proposed, seeks to codify these existing regulations, which contractors are already required to follow, as well as implement additional safety and enforcement protocols. I'll quickly summarize the major changes in the bill. Require contractors to attend periodic training on demolition practices as determined by L&I. Require Class A demolition contractors to have a demolition supervisor and site safety manager with 3 years of experience in demolition. Class A demolition contractors are those authorized to demolish any building, including major buildings. Increase the bonding requirement for the Class A contractors to $50,000. The bonding requirement for Class B demolition contractors who are authorized to demolish buildings, any building with the exception of major buildings, remains at $10,000. Increase the scope of violations that will allow the department to suspend a demolition contractor's license. The department will now be able to suspend, after the appropriate administrative hearing, a contractor's license for a single violation of a requirement of Chapter 33 of the Building Code, which is related to safety measures during construction, a single violation of regulations set forth by the Philadelphia Department of Public Health or the Philadelphia Water Department related to demolition, particularly health air management regulations and water stormwater regulations, or a serious violation issued by OSHA and reported to the department. This is a subtle change, but it allows the department to shut down demolition sites without waiting for another department.
Okay.
The department obtained feedback and input from the demolition contractor industry in the drafting of this bill, and we are confident that the requirements in the bill will be effective in increasing the safety of demolition sites across the city. As Councilman Jones said, we are constantly evolving our safety protocols around demolition sites. The department's commitment to building safety means we're always working to improve, and we believe that these new requirements will help us set us further on that path for more demolition safety. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I have three folks here to testify on this bill. Colleen McCauley, and I noted that your testimony is for both bills, so I don't know if you want to testify now, or do you want to wait until the other bill? And then I have Rachel Kamenisky and Justin Pires, or Pines? Is that Pines? Yeah. Why don't you, the three of you, come, and Rebecca, you want to sit off to the side and
Of course.
let them, because you're testifying on both bills, we're going to, let's stick to the demo contractor, because I noticed your testimony has both bills in it, so I don't know if you want to highlight the ones related to this particular bill.
Sure.
Since your testimony is in writing, it'll go on the record, so if you want to summarize particularly what you want to highlight for Bill 170989.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning. Really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you this morning. I'm Colleen McCauley. I'm the Health Policy Director at Public Citizens for Children and Youth, and we're a child advocacy and policy organization working in the Southeast to improve the conditions for children. I've been working on lead poisoning for the 16 years I've been at PCCY, and during this time, the city has made a tremendous commitment to reducing lead poisoning, and we've done so over those last 16 years. We have room to grow. There's still about 2,400 kids who are poisoned, and that's enough kids to fill about 100 kindergarten classrooms every year. So the demolition bills you're considering today are another crucial step towards protecting babies from being poisoned by lead. And we commend council for taking lead poisoning so seriously. And thank you, Chairperson Quiñones-Sánchez, and bill sponsors, Councilman Squilla, Jones, and Johnson, and all the members of the committee for your leadership on this issue. We believe these demolition bills do provide critical protections to workers on and residents living nearby demolition sites, and there is evidence showing that kids can and do get poisoned by lead in soil and dust in homes. We believe that the bills lack some critical specificity, however, regarding how to execute some of the protections in the bills, to the extent that perhaps some of the intended protections may not be achieved. There is newer research and best practices out there about mitigating airborne and soil-based lead exposures related to demolition. In fact, 2 weeks ago, PCCY put on a Philly Lead Summit, bringing together local and national experts and stakeholders with the goal of launching a new coalition to advance the recommendations in the city's lead poisoning prevention advisory group. And we did address the issue of suppressing lead hazards at demolition sites, and several council member staff were at the summit, including council members Domb, Reynolds Brown, and Clark. One of the keynote speakers we had there, Dr. Dave Jacobs, he has conducted studies on lead hazards and demolition and helped other municipalities design protective policies. He's the chief scientist at the National Center for Healthy Housing in Washington, D.C. And so the recommendations that we're putting forward today are largely based on his suggestions and on the best practices that are currently available. In addition, I understand that the University of Pennsylvania Center of Excellence in Environmental Toxicology also submitted specific suggestions, actually to strengthen the second bill, particularly related to wedding protocols. So that's addressed in the next bill that you'll consider. So in particular, to this bill, what we're recommending is to add a few a few features to strengthen it, in particular to include training for folks on the renovation, repair, and paint rule, RRP rule, that has to deal with how to work with and remove lead hazards during renovation. And in addition, to ensure that dust suppression measures and cleanup activities are properly implemented, and for the role of the manager in the bill to include, oversight of the, I'm sorry.
One of the things you highlight here is the
Yes.
the EPA course in particular that you wanted to highlight as it relates to this bill.
Yes, that's right.
Can
And
you-
in addition,
Can you start wrapping it up so we can get the rest of the testimony, and then I'll let the bill sponsor, who has a couple questions.
sure. I could just end there then.
Okay. Next.
Okay. My name is Rachel Kaminsky.
Can you get closer to the microphone, please?
Sure. Is that,
You can bring it to you.
bring it to me? Okay. I'm sorry. My first time doing this, so a little
all right.
nervous. So my name is Rachel Kaminsky. I'm from Get the Lead Out Reservoirs Philadelphia group, which is a group of concerned parents and individuals in the city. One of the other things that we kind of touched a lot upon what I was going to address, the specific thing that we're also talking about is in 9-1008 demolition contract license, license to require conduct. We're asking that under the dust control during a demolition activity, we're asking an enclosure to ensure that structures are properly wetted prior and during demolition activities, that dust control activities shall comply with the minimum methods and procedures detailed by the East Baltimore Development Initiative, which is what David Jacobs was talking about. Some of those initiatives, and some of them we already do in the city, is the adequate use of fencing, barriers, and other means to limit casual entry to demolition sites with demolition is complete with all debris moved. Widespread notifications to residents, community organizations, faith-based organizations, and city agencies about when, where demolition would be happening, along with a highly visible signage on houses to be demolished. Training community block monitors to observe the demolition process and assist residents with questions and home safety measures. 4 days of training on lead safety and related issues for demolition supervisors, and 2 days training for all other workers. Removal and safe disposal of building components containing high amounts of lead before demolition buildings that were structurally sound, using ample amounts of water throughout the process to reduce the spread of dust. Careful demolition using the picker method instead of the more traditional wrecking ball, bulldozing, or implosion methods, and high fencing to control the spread of debris and dust. Careful procedures for removing debris from demolished buildings, including the use of hoses to suppress dust and plastic covering on trucks to ensure that debris and dust are contained during removal. Post-demolition street and sidewalk cleaning and debris removal. Removing 2 inches of topsoil on all properties where demolition has occurred and replacing it with new sod. Providing community residents with high-efficiency particulate air, HEPA vacuums, and track mats, which removes dust from shoes and individuals when they enter the home to reduce lead dust exposure in residents' homes following demolition, and implementing testing of the streets, sidewalks, and surrounding demolished properties to measure the impact of demolition and debris removal on the local environment.
You can proceed, Mr. Pines.
Good morning. My name is Justin Pines, and thank you for hearing us, Chairperson Quiñones-Sánchez and the Councilman. I just wanted to share, and I'm here to share, my wife is 7.5 months pregnant, and we live on on Trenton Avenue, and she walks to the train every day by several construction sites, right by the high school, the Kensington High School, and takes the Berks train to CHOP, where she works as a nurse. And we were tested, and she, thankfully, I came back normal. She came back slightly above normal. But, you know, when all of this information surfaced in June and the article about Rachel, it scared a lot of people. And in particular, one of my best friends and colleagues, her daughter went to the daycare that just opened on Frankfurt Ave, right north of Norris. And there was a construction site adjacent to that. And they did not have the fencing up with the proper barriers. They weren't mitigating dust. And after just 4 weeks of being at this daycare, at an enclosed daycare, she came back with above EPA elevated levels of lead, which freaked her out. She moved, she sold her house, moved to the suburbs, and is, you know, spreading kind of scary things. And that, my wife and I almost did the same thing until we came to some of the community meetings and realized that a lot of action is being taken, and, you know, amazing people really care about this. So I'm just here to share and support and appreciate the councilmen and women for what, you know, hearing us out and our commitment to really making the city safe. And we recognize that lead paint has been an issue for a long time, but lead dust and the soil in the, you know, River Wards area with all of the past, you know, and getting resurfaced with the construction, it's a really important issue. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
So, thank you very much. Again, this is an evolution of thought. What we thought 10, 15 years ago is not the prevailing safety measures of today. What we're doing today is bifurcated based on Squiller's bill and Councilman Squiller's bill and mine. What we want to do on our end is the safety officers to be trained in and present in demolition. What you're asking is a part of that, and I'm not sure, and we're going to take a look at what level OSHA training does that kick in. And based on what you've just said to me, the person that's standing there that might have an OSHA 10 might need an OSHA 30 and things like that. And I would ask the city so at what level in the OSHA requirements does the particular understanding of how lead poisoning is transmitted kick in? And it's a little bit of the prevention happens in Councilman Squiller's bill, the fencing and all of that. But I want to know the overseers of these demolition projects. Where is the knowledge level when it comes to this issue?
So I do want to make sure we're keeping the two bills separate, as you said, so that this is the requirements for the demolition contractor license. We are going to be conducting a training for all the demolition contractors that's going to be developed by Allan and I with best practices. We've already worked very closely with the EPA, the State Department of Environmental Protection, and with OSHA. We are actually going to be training all of our inspectors on the EPA's renovation, repair, and painting. And we are going to be incorporating some of that into the training of the demolition contractors. And we're also going to be working very closely with OSHA because a lot of these things are already a requirement through OSHA. And we're going to be incorporating that into the training that we're putting together, which is going to reflect best practices. A lot of this, and I don't want to I have whole separate testimony on the dust control, but a lot of this does come in with the Philadelphia Water Department and the Air Management Division of the Health Department, and we've been working very closely with them as well.
So I'm glad you put that on the record. I had no idea that asbestos was in concrete. And when they break it up, it actually becomes airborne. So the person, Bill Greenlee, jogging down the street, he runs through this plume, not knowing that it's not just in his lungs, but on his clothing. And he takes that jogging suit back to his house, and he's doing the laundry, and everybody in
Derek Green up there.
Yeah, wasn't it? So as we evolve, it is good to know that the city's training will evolve with it. So
Absolutely.
that's what I wanted to hear.
And I do want to point out that the vast majority of our demolitions are already done by hand. Any attached structure, the requirement is that it must be done manually. So a lot of cities don't have that requirement, so it is very unique to Philadelphia that, again, the vast majority of our demolitions are done by hand, which creates significantly less dust and debris. And we already have some very specific air management regulations in place. Air management actually, through the health department, they actually have a 1-hour response time. You might get the air management there quicker than you get the police department there. They had 24 hours a day. If you believe that there's dust coming off a construction site, air management will be there within the hour.
So, by way, when the jackhammers are going and they're breaking up the concrete, do we have any way of knowing how old that concrete is to know if it's one of those situations where, and I don't expect you to know all of that right there in testifying, but if there's a section of the city that meets that kind of older requirement when they used to use that as the ingredient that bound the concrete, do we kind of know where they are?
I don't know. That would be a question for the streets department, and again, also for air management. A lot of the stuff that you're talking about with the jackhammering of the sidewalk is typically infrastructure work that's not covered by an L&I permit, so we wouldn't have involvement in that.
And then finally, I know when you have big enough jobs like that, there is a water actual misting that goes on. And when does that kick in? Do you know that?
And again, that's addressed in the other bill, in Councilman Squilla's bill. The construction codes are pretty much silent on means and methods, kind of for construction, demolition, for everything. And the 2009 International Construction Code is silent when it comes to both lead paint and dust control. Obviously, we're a little bit behind because we still have 2009, but we're getting 2018 and we're going through that right now. So I'm assuming that there is some more specific things because, Councilman, like you said, we've learned a lot more since 2009. But we do have an amendment that says dust-producing operations shall be wetted down to the extent necessary to control dust. And that is a determination made by air management to make sure that the dust is being controlled. And it also fills in with the water department's stormwater regulations as to how much water they really want running into the street and into the sewers.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll wait some of my questions for the next bill, but I do want to thank the people who testified and also understanding that this was really brought to our attention from the residents. And it's the residents that made this change happen. And, you know, sometimes it's not perfect. We still have to work with our regulations. You're going to hear some of this bill says certain things, and we got some requests that we sent to L&I about, you know, circulating a distance, making sure it's wet down properly, all these other things that we're going to put into a policy from L&I standpoint as we learn more of what we could do. So the bill might not have every little small intricate detail in there, but we're going to continue to work with L&I to make sure that's part of their policies moving forward so that they get everything that we want in that legislation will be then contemplated and codified within the regulations. So I think that's important. But again, I just wanted to thank you for coming to testify and also understanding that by bringing this to the attention of the city and to us, that these changes are now being put in place. And if we feel like this isn't enough, we'll just continue to do more and make sure that we try to protect our residents the best we can. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to ask the clerk to read the title of the next bill so that Rebecca can.
An ordinance amending section B3303 of Title IV of the Philadelphia Code entitled Demolition by amending requirements regarding site grading and use of mechanical equipment and adding requirements regarding material chutes, dust control fencing, and storage of demolition debris, and making technical changes all under certain terms and conditions.
Good morning, Councilwoman Sanchez and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. I am Rebecca Swanson, Director of Planning for the Department of L&I. Today, I am here to provide testimony on Bill Number 170903, which, if enacted, would amend Section B 3303 of the Philadelphia Building Code entitled Demolition by amending and adding requirements related to dust and soil control. First, the Department would like to thank Councilman Squilla for introducing this bill on behalf of the administration. Many demolitions in Philadelphia are done by hand, meaning that contractors dismantle buildings piece by piece as opposed to using large mechanical equipment to knock the building down. Manual demolitions are required for any attached property and are preferable in most other demolitions as well, not just for safety reasons, but because hand demolition creates significantly less dust. In addition to performing demolitions by hand, demolition contractors should also take other steps to minimize dust and dirt migration from the site. Many demolition contractors already take these measures, but the proposed bill codifies these requirements so that they can be enforced by the city. The major changes in the bill include a requirement that chutes be used when dropping debris more than 20 feet. This repeats an existing OSHA requirement. Requirement for 5-foot-high dust control fencing on all temporary fencing around demolition sites. A prohibition on mechanical demolition when the average wind speed exceeds 20 miles per hour. A prohibition on storage of demolition debris on sidewalk, streets, or surrounding lots. Contractors are required to properly dispose of all debris in a timely manner. That requirement is being addressed in part by Bill number 160768, previously discussed today. Requirement that sites be covered with 4 inches of clean fill following the demolition. Contractors will no longer be permitted to substitute asphalt or concrete paving. The city's 57 licensed demolition contractors, by and large, are committed to safe demolition practices. We need all demolition contractors to focus not only on safety, but also on protecting against public health concerns. This bill codifies what we want all of our contractors to do. Be mindful of surrounding citizens and diligent in keeping neighborhoods clean. The department is confident that the requirements in this bill will be effective to this end. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions.
I'll hear the rest of the testimony and then we'll ask questions. Or did you guys have something? They all testify on both? Or yeah, they were testifying on both. Is there anything you want to add on this bill or pretty much you guys covered it all?
No, there's things I wanted to add.
Okay. Rachel?
Oh, sure. No, it's okay. We're asking that...
Say your name for the record.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Rachel Kaminsky, get the lead out. We're asking that the uniform layer of clean soil not contain any level of 80 parts per million. We're also seeking an additional section to provide language for a demolition notification of 400 feet to update the current posted notifications as listed in Section A-303.2 of the Philadelphia Code requirements, where currently it only says that the 3 nearest properties on either side of the subject property, 7 nearest properties across the street from the subject property, and 7 nearest properties to the rear of the subject property. We're also asking for an additional section should include demolition education to be posted to residents and demolition notification. Majority of what we get asked is what can we do to protect ourselves? And some of the following language would be dust from a demolition can travel hundreds of feet. Stay inside when a structure is being demolished and when debris is being removed from the site. Do not touch or remove any debris near the demolition site. To keep doors and windows closed. If you must use doors or windows, use those that face away from the site. Remove shoes at the door and check clothes and shoes for dust before entering the home. Wash hands before eating, especially after playing or working outside. Wash children's toys frequently, especially those that may enter the mouth. Clean windowsills, floors, and other surfaces where dust collects and with warm soapy water, paper towels, and if you use them up, be sure to throw away. And that's something that can be put into the posting that they give individual houses to let you know that a demolition is happening. And they do seem like common sense things, but it's not something that everybody definitely thinks about. We're also asking for an additional section to add the lead and other metals inspection report as a prerequisite for demolition permit, considering that all homes built by 1978 are likely to contain some lead-based paint. Also, the phase-out of lead-based gasoline wasn't complete until 1986, where it's estimated that 7 million tons of lead were released into the atmosphere from said gasoline. This lead lays dormant in the soil, and it's estimated that this is the largest cause, at least according to the Health Department and Allan, for lead soil findings. An example of such a requirement is the asbestos inspection report listed in the Building Demolition Site Safety Plan, public information under B, Safety Provisions. We're also asking that that section should also have language required a past use of the site as a prerequisite for demolition or an excavation plan. This past use listing would also be included on the building site demolition safety plan public information under B, safety provisions, which, going back to what Justin said about the Carmore site that was near that daycare center, not everybody knew that that used to be a former lead smelting site, and then once the article got published about it, that's when people knew and were really understandably upset by that. We're also asking that in B-3303.11.1, that this be included.
By any chance, do you have all that stuff in writing?
Yes, I do.
Okay, are you going to submit that for the record?
Yes, please.
Okay, can we get a copy of that? The clerk? Excuse me, can we get a copy of that for the record? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Like I said, it's my first time, so.
No, it's easier if we put that on the record, because you're talking a lot of different terminology there.
Right.
You want to wrap up, and then Councilman
Sure.
Squilla has a couple.
So we're also asking just that, let's see, when loose material is removed from the demolition site at the end of each day, that the area be wet washed or swept clean, and that all sidewalks and street within a 1-block radius be wet washed or swept up after demolition is done.
Okay. Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Rebecca. We heard some of the things Rachel just testified on, and there was some of the emails that I received also, and we forwarded over to the commissioner. And some of them, I think, are definitely things we should add. Do you suggest they should be added into the legislation, or these things can be accomplished through regulations?
These are all things that can be accomplished through regulation. Again, the legislation that was drafted this is a long time in the works. It's been done in close consultation with the industry, with code professionals from all over the country, with the EPA, with the Department of Environmental Protection. We are very confident that this represents best practices. Again, many of the things that had been suggested are things that are already being done. There's already education through the demolition notification. The Health Department, Allan and I have already committed to putting together some educational materials. The EPA is helping draft those about what people can do to protect themselves in their own home, vacuuming, wiping down your windowsills and things like that, that we're going to post jointly on the Health and Allan websites. So there's a lot of things that the departments have already working on. So I think if there's any additional modifications that, as we move forward with this, that we see other problems that may arise, we have the flexibility to do everything by regulation.
To change in the regulation, and that's what was told to me, so I just wanted to make sure and have that for the record. But also, if there are violations, or if neighbors or somebody reports of things not being followed, what does the demolition stop at that time? Does Allan and I have the ability to stop the demolition until they come up to follow the regulations, or is there something else that we need to do?
Yes, so this is where the intersection with Councilman Jones and Councilman Johnson's bill with the demo contractor license. So obviously, if there becomes a dust control or dirt migration issue, that's air management, and we have really increased our collaboration with air management as far as receiving direct referrals. If they are notified of a problem about dust migrating from the site, getting that back to our building inspector, who can go on site and figure out if this is a conversation with the contractor, if this is the demolition, there needs to be a stop work order, or if the action needs to be taken against the license, which Bill number 170898 will now allow us to do based on a single violation related to safety measures, or a single violation of the air management regulations or the water department stormwater regulations related to demolition. We'll be able to take action against the license immediately, which we never, after the proper due process administrative hearing, which we never had the ability to do before. So we'd be able to stop the work until we're confident that it's being done safely, that if a site safety manager needs to come on site or anything like that, and then also have consequences for the contractor who may not be following the requirements properly.
And is there any, as these demos are, I guess, designated to be potential hazardous dust, Is there anything special that Al and I would do to watch these sites or to regulate the sites, or do we have to wait to concerns from the community?
Well, all demolitions in Philadelphia are good. Every house has lead paint in it. But because they're coming down manually, again, it reduces the dust. When we're talking about those sites that have particular environmental concerns because of what the site used to be used for, there is a closer look to ensure that the demolition contractor has had the proper training and that the EPA is being brought in. There was one that actually Commissioner Perry personally held the permit for a site in Kensington. I believe it's right near Greensgrove Farms.
Port Richmond.
Port Richmond. I don't know if it's, I believe it's your district. So that one the commission, that permit is being held until we can be assured that the EPA has come out and done their environmental testing, and that we know that that contractor is equipped to do this properly.
Okay. All right, that's very good. Thank you for your answers, and if we have other questions, well, feel free to reach out, and the community too. If you have other things that you would like to add or see, I'm sure we could maybe hear them and see if we could add them into the regulation part of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here testify on any of these bills?
I'm sorry, I did have something to say about this bill as well.
Okay, can you
Sure.
quickly?
Again, I'm Colleen McCauley from Public Citizens for Children and Youth. And again, we're so pleased that this initiative is being taken. But to your point, Councilman Squilla, one of the recommendations in my testimony is to consider, even if for a short period of time, that an independent testing of building sites be done prior to and after demolitions to just ensure that the safety protocols are followed and public health is maintained. And in my testimony, I've referred to some protocols that were put forward in East Baltimore, and Rachel referenced them as well. And I have those protocols, a copy of those protocols here, along with some of the other reference studies from my testimony. And I think that in addition to the governmental standards, the EPA and such, that it's very important to also look at these studies that have been done in other municipalities and protocols that have been put forward. They really do combine some of the best practices we know, and to integrate them into the regulations. Because again, the concern is with the bills that around wetting, for example, there aren't specific directions about how to do that, and there are some best practices out there for how other municipalities are dealing with that and protecting residents and workers. And so I have copies of all those protocols here. I'm happy to provide additional copies. I just have one with me. And then again, you can see in my testimony the specific additions that could be, as Rebecca mentioned. Yes, this is the full copy that could be considered for regulation.
Yeah, we will put that on the record and make copies for anybody on the committee that desires to do so.
It would be pleased to be an ongoing resource. And Dr. Dave Jacobs is just in DC, for example, and I know he'd be pleased to be a resource as well.
And I'm sorry,
Councilman
Madam Chair. Rebecca, do you want to just respond to that as something that we could look at as part of the regulations? I know you said you spoke to people in these areas or looked at their practices, and it's something that I know the regulations are not in place at this time, all of them anyway, but it's something that we could add to the regulation part.
Yeah, we're always happy to take a look going forward. Again, a lot of what is being put forth in these bills was stuff that was already required. We're codifying it. We're putting in enforcement provisions. We are happy to continue looking, but we are also very confident that what we have put forth represents best practices. It really addresses the dangers that the health department studies have identified as being the real danger for lead poisoning. Obviously, the city's lead poisoning rates have gone down significantly. I believe we're actually a lot lower than some of the other cities that have stepped forward to talk about their practices. Our lead poisoning rates are lower. But again, we're always happy to look at additional regulations going forward, but we want to get this in place and see how this works.
Yeah, but we don't want to slow this down. We want to get this up and running as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
And then, again, like we do normally, is we'll tweak it as we go along. But it's just nice when we hear other opportunities in other municipalities that are doing things that seem to be working. It's nice just to look at them and to make sure if we need to incorporate them into the practice.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. We thank PCCY for their proactive approach to this and collaborating with us. So anyone here else to testify? Seeing none, we will go into our public meeting, the Committee on Licenses and Inspections, and the chair calls on the vice chair, Councilman Domb, for a motion on the amendment to Bill 170955.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that the amendment to Bill Number 170955 be adopted.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the amendment to Bill 170955 is adopted. Can you give me a motion on the amendment to Bill 160768?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move the amendment to Bill Number 160768 be adopted.
All those in favor? Any opposition? Seeing none, Bill 160768, the amendment is adopted. Councilman, can you give me a motion on all the bills as amended?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that Bill Number 170903, 170898, and 160768 as amended, and 170955 as amended, be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to prevent first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Seeing none, Bill 170955 as amended, Bill 160768 as amended, Bill 170989, Bill 170903 have been moved out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and further rule suspension to allow first reading at our next council session. This concludes our public meeting. Thank you very much to everyone for their time and patience.